Good afternoon and good evening to everyone around the world. It's good to see everyone today. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, as we always do, we begin with a recitation, and I would like to, of course, today is Chapter 23, The Former Deeds of Bodhisattva Medicine King. And we do a recitation together. I'd like to encourage you to please join me for this. This sutra is like a clear, cool pool that can satisfy all who thirst. It is like a fire to those who are cold, like robes to the naked, like a leader to a caravan of merchants, like a parent to children, like a ferry to those desiring to cross, like a doctor to the sick, like a lamp to those in darkness, like jewels to the poor, like a king to the people, like the open seas to traders, and like a torch to dispel the darkness. Similarly, this Dharma Flower Sutra, living beings to take leave of all suffering and all pain and disease, and to completely undo the fetters of birth and death, because this sutra is good medicine for the diseases of the people of Jambudvipa. If the sick hear this sutra, their illnesses will instantly disappear, will neither grow old nor die. They will blow the conch of the Dharma, beat the drum of the great Dharma, and rescue all living beings from the sea of aging, illness, and death. So we begin by setting the scene. As we move into the next section of the Lotus Sutra, there are no new teachings or dharmas. These closing chapters describe how we can live and be in the world, sharing and teaching the Dharma. These last 6 chapters, in fact, were added around 100 years after the core of the Lotus Sutra. These chapters describe stories of great mythic bodhisattvas as mythic heroes. As humans, archetypes and heroes serve as an inspiration in grand, glorious similes and stories encapsulating qualities that we can aspire to. These embodied archetypes idealize qualities we want to cultivate in ourselves, whether it's the Buddha's compassion and inner peace, or Iron Man's ingenuity and bravery. What you regularly contemplate changes what and how you think. This chapter is all about Bodhisattva, Vaisajraraja. We first met him in Chapter 10. There are some great high points in this chapter. Like most of the Lotus Sutra, the message of hope and encouragement is really wonderful and inspirational for us. Now, it describes these forces in the universe around us that will work for our benefit when we tune into them. We'll get into that more later. However, there are some great low points in this chapter that we will talk about. And this chapter has been highly controversial within Buddhist circles. It describes disturbing scenes of immolation, denigrating women, and it really requires us to apply great mental agility and rational gymnastics to understand what's really being said here. This chapter has been used by various people in the past as evidence and justification for subsequent acts of self-immolation, where the person sets themselves on fire while chanting Chapter 23. Burning one's body and immediately being healed and restored, however, is metaphorically viewed as symbolic of the power of one's devotion and vow. It's an assertion of truth, a kind of vow or oath that in and of itself has magical powers. So it's not the actual burning of one's body that is being conveyed here. It's the power of your vow and how that vow gives you the energy and zeal to seek awakening for yourself and others, and then to illuminate the darkness around you. It's important, as we've always said from the beginning of this Lotus Sutra, that we must always remember that the words were authored by mortal humans in a given set historical context. The Lotus Sutra, like every religious document, is flawed, as it, one, represents the best thinking at that time, and two, mere words can never fully describe the transcendent, ultimate, for us, the eternal Buddha. So this chapter, again, is focused on the great Bodhisattva medicine ruler, who represents the healing power of the Dharma. We first met this person in Chapter 10, the teacher of the Dharma, where Shakyamuni was speaking to him, metaphorically connecting that teaching and sharing is transformative and healing. So teaching is healing was the message of Chapter 10. In Chapter 13, encouragement for keeping this sutra, Bodhisattva medicine ruler vows to expound the Lotus Sutra to cure the people of their illnesses which arise from the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. And now, in Chapter 23, tells a story how Bodhisattva medicine ruler set their own body on fire and then miraculously restored it by the power of their merits, virtues, and wisdom. This symbolizes their burning zeal, offering their arms and deeds and body, life, for the sake of the Dharma and the healing powers of the Dharma. Grand Master Juri, some of us know as Tiantai, awoke, realized awakening when chanting Chapter 23, and he was considered a reincarnation of Bodhisattva medicine ruler. What are the major themes of this chapter? Well, first is that the Bodhisattvas that we're going to focus on now are heroic archetypes. Some people believe that they are real beings, and in today's service, I am not going to say that they aren't or that they are. If you consider them real and it's helpful for you, please continue to do so. If you find them more useful to think of them as a model for behavior, role models to then, model and pattern your own behavior, that's fine too, or a combination of all of that. These heroic archetypes are attendants to the Buddha. Their superpower, again, we're going to today look at how there is a psychological, more practical, pragmatic, mundane view of these archetypes, and then we will also spend a bit of time on the metaphysical view. These bodhisattvas are attendants to the eternal Buddha. Their superpower is presenting themselves to others in whatever form they find most pleasing. This is all, again, about skillful means. Skillful means, as you will remember from the beginning, is one of the handful of major themes in the entire Lotus Sutra. So their superpower is they can present themselves to others, us, in whatever form we need so that we can hear the message of loving kindness and compassion and wisdom that the Buddha is sharing with everyone all the time. They could be a person. They could be an animal. It could be an event. We're not going to limit ourselves to thinking about these as, particular beings, because it could be all of that. And whether they are real or simply functions of dependent origination, it is our faith, trust, and confidence in the eternal Buddha that empowers them. And with that faith, we become these archetypes. We become these archetypes and influence us. And as we transform, we in turn help others, who in turn become these archetypes themselves, and then in turn influence and help us. So this wonderfully supportive circle of uplifting each other, where I help you, you help me. This is all encoded in these ideas of these bodhisattvas. It also describes our mental posture and that the Dharma is brought to life through our practice, through our efforts, through the zeal we have. And that practice is awakening. It's not that we practice to become awakened, but we are awakened when we practice. So it's the act of practicing. And it's this idea that Dharma is medicine, and it's through our zeal to transform ourselves, to heal ourselves, and to share this with other people, to reduce the world's suffering and heal others, that is so transformative and so powerful. And our practice is a continual process of trial and error. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Begin again and again and again. The Dharma's transformative healing powers are immeasurable. Leading all the people to the Dharma is the greatest offering that we can make. The last major theme that I want to cover, we will get to this, and we did chant this earlier, are the 12 similes and how powerful those are. And then finally, mentioned in this chapter is the 5th 500-year period, and we'll learn how that is where we got the term Kosen Rufu, or world peace, or wide spread of the Dharma. So heroes of mythology. This is Amaterasu, who is on our 10 world calligraphic mandalas. Nichiren inscribed her. And then this is Kannon, Kuan Yin, cry regarder of the world's size, from chapter 25, which is next month. And you can see an image here of her holding a baby in her arms and comforting the baby. Now this statue is ginormous. If you look really carefully down at the bottom, you'll see a building, and that gives you a sense of scale for this. I believe this is somewhere in the Nara area of Japan. Now, to compare and contrast this powerful image of a mother holding a child is the Catholic tradition of Mother Mary holding a baby. And for me, this really represents that we, children of the Buddha, sometimes almost all the time, are suffering and crying, and they will hold us tenderly. And this is how we also can look at ourselves, so that when we feel pain and suffering, we don't try and push away our suffering or hide it or eliminate it, but we just hold it tenderly as a parent holds their child. And the same thing can be applied to when a friend is in need. So these are qualities of tenderness, compassion, and healing. This next one is Hachiman, and Hachiman is also on our Gohonzons. And this is, of course, Hercules, and this is, of course, Bishamon, who is the king of the north, and also on our Gohonzons on the upper left-hand corner. So all of these great bodhisattvas of mythology, their superpower is presenting themselves to others in whatever form they find most pleasing. So this idea that these entities, beings, forces, functions, events are attendants of the Buddha, this is from Michael's forthcoming Nichiren Shu Buddhist Dictionary, and I'm going to read it. It's long. Please stay with me. The Buddha's attendants have their own activities, supernatural powers, vows, responses, and teachings. They are advanced bodhisattvas who can manifest in many forms according to the needs of the person. Among the attendants of the Buddha are sentient beings related to the Buddha because they share the principal Buddha nature with him. They are like the Buddha's children. Their vows have enabled them to be born in the presence of the Buddha. They are produced by the receptivity and response of the Dharma body that manifests accommodative bodies to teach and transform sentient beings. Attendants are also spoken of metaphorically as the various practices and realizations of we practitioners. The eternal... Oh, and I want to stop for a second and thank Brother Doug for a book recommendation. Doug, I'm going to not get the title perfectly correct. It was Tuning into Soka Buddhism. Is that what the title was?
I think it's called I think so. Tune in or tuning in. Yeah.
It's a great book. Doug, he read it recently and recommended it to us, and I read it. And in that book, he talks about a question: does the eternal Buddha have agency? And one could then say, does the eternal Buddha do they have self-conscious action? Are they in fact like a god? And it was interesting because I had to really think about that. And then I had to have a one-on-one session with Sensei Michael about it. And he had me read some things. And then the more I read, this is where I got these passages that I just read to you. It was like, wow, this is so perfect for today's discussion. And then I was struck by the synchronicity of how all of us are so interconnected that in preparing for today's lecture, just Doug recommends this book, which is terrific. And I read the book and it helps me prepare for the lecture. And again, these beings are not necessarily beings that appear to us. They're how we transform ourselves. So Doug was acting as Bodhisattva Medicine King to me to recommend this book, which then helped me go to Michael and then deepen my practice. And now in turn, I'm sharing it back to you. So this full circle of sharing, it's just so powerful. And that's what really the next 6 chapters is all about, how we are in the world. So what does it mean about the eternal or original Buddha or primordial Buddha, depending on translations that you use, the Buddha that's described in chapter 16? Does this person, is it a person? Does it have agency? Now, what Michael told me was that the eternal or original Buddha does have a certain kind of agency or ability to respond to us. However, it is not like a human self where it's conscious of itself and it's a being, like a person or a, God or whatever, and deliberately acting, through self-conscious choice. Buddhas respond in a completely unself-conscious and spontaneous, not contrived or deliberate way. This is the unity of the Trikaya. The accommodative and reward bodies are responses to the Dharma body, which help people awaken to the Dharma body, which is their own true nature. Problems arise when people try to...
Of responses of the Dharma body, not to the Dharma body.
Oh, responses, thank you, typo, darn it, thank you. Responses of the Dharma body, which is our own true nature. Problems arise when people try to divide up the Trikaya, imagining the Dharma body acts on its own, or imagining that the true nature of the historical Buddha is not also our own true nature. There is no self and other distinction. Everything is interconnected and interbeing. Everything that happens in a single thought moment, Ichinen Sanzen, could be thought of as a longing for the totality of the moment, a complete expression of this totality, always simultaneously one and the other, both and neither. None of these 4 options should be stuck to if one fully realizes the middle way. Every single thought moment is both a longing receptivity and an expression of that total response of the true reality in terms of a single thought moment. Receptivity and response can also be translated as sympathetic resonance or stimulus and response, the connection between the capacity and receptivity of us and a Buddha or advanced Bodhisattva's response. And the subtlety of this receptivity and response refers to the subtlety of the Buddha's wholesome influence and assistance given in response to the needs of sentient beings in accord with their receptivity to his teachings. The Buddha's ongoing loving kindness and great compassion that responds to the suffering and even happiness of all beings. The receptivity of sentient beings is like a pond that can reflect the moon above, while the Buddha's response is like the moon reflecting in the pond below, even though neither pond nor moon actually move. The Buddha speaks of it in the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the duration of the life of the Tathagata, when he says, quote, "When some people come to me, I saw the strength of the power of their faith and of the other faculties of theirs with my Buddha eye." And this idea of receptivity and response struck me so powerfully that this receptivity is Namu and the response is Myoho Renge Kyo. Now we get into skillful means, because again, major theme within the entire Lotus Sutra. And from the sutra, it says, in the midst of the teaching of the Buddha, virtue of the pure light of the sun and the moon, he practiced diligence and wandered as a mendicant, single-mindedly seeking Buddhahood for the full duration of 12,000 years attaining the samadhi of appearing in any physical form. Having attained his samadhi, his mind was filled with great joy, and he thought to himself, my attainment of the samadhi of appearing in any physical form is entirely due to the power of hearing the Dharma Flower Sutra. Breaking this up, the first verse, in the midst of the Buddha's teaching, does that mean that he just got up and left while the Buddha was teaching? That he was really not paying attention? He was texting on his iPhone? No. Here we see that the Buddha's teaching means the moment-to-moment process flow state of Yui Butsu, Yo Butsu. We're always the single, the Ichinen Sandan, the single moment is the Buddha's teaching. Right now, you're experiencing a moment of Yui Butsu, Yo Butsu. This is the Buddha's teaching. And appearing is any physical form is a superpower of all bodhisattvas, meaning they can see deeply the person they are with and skillfully share and teach the Dharma to that specific person, always asking themselves, what does this person need right now, in this moment? What words will reach them? This moment is about them, not about us. So really, from a psychological, practical standpoint, it's not like superpowers of we transform into this great bodhisattva, or this bodhisattva appears to us in corporeal physical form. It's really a metaphor for that we are so skillful that we're listening so deeply to this person in front of us, and then asking ourselves, how can I help relieve this person's suffering? Like the two statues of Kuan Yin and Mother Mary holding a baby who's crying. What do they need to hear? So this skillful means appearing to others in the form they most need to see and using the words they most need to hear that will open their heart-mind to the sound of the Dharma. The power of hearing, sound, again, the 30-second mark of a Buddha, this idea that we need to vocalize in the world. And this is why our practice of mantra chanting is so powerful, because it's a vocalization of the Dharma. The Buddha is metaphorical for always teaching. If we listen, the wind through the leaves of a tree, the water burbling in the stream, the birds singing in the trees, the sound of your breath. The Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge Kyo, contains and expresses the entire universe, which is the eternal Buddha. We strive, our zeal, to always be practicing, no matter what we are doing. Wandering is a metaphor for going about and living our daily lives, whether we're at work, with our partner, with our friend, cooking dinner, reading a book. We're in the moment, and we're so joyful, filled with joy, to be fully present in that moment so that we are fully liberated and fully engaged. And it is through engaging fully in life that we are then filled with joy, not through renouncing or escaping life. So this is everything that I just got from this particular passage. And next describes our mental posture of zeal. The Sanskrit word virya could be translated as zeal, energy, diligence, effort, or vigor. It's the third of 7 factors of enlightenment, the fourth of the 6 perfections. And our service is called gongyo, which means assiduous practice. And as we said earlier, practice is awakening. We don't practice and then become awakened. When we are practicing, we are awake. Without our practice, there is no awakening. And our meditation practice is to our minds what exercise is to our bodies. Meditation trains the skills of concentration, or focus and calming, clarity, or insight and awareness, or analytics, equanimity, which is peace and ease, balance and resiliency, and loving kindness, friendliness, and compassion. But the message here for all of us is that we have to do the work. We have to practice, because there is no awakening without practice. And Dharma is medicine. As we read earlier, when we first recited, there is an alternate reading to what we chanted, and I'll say it now, is because this sutra is the good medicine for the diseases of the people of the world. If the sick hear this sutra, their illnesses will instantly disappear. They will not die before they grow old. And this really applies to physical healing, emotional healing, mental healing, this entire transformation of ourselves. And illness are the diseases that arise from the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. So anytime that we're with someone, and including ourselves, and we listen deeply and compassionately with loving kindness to this person, and we help them, we are manifesting the qualities of this great Bodhisattva, medicine king. So take this good medicine, and do not worry, it will not cure you. And this sutra is the good medicine for the diseases of the people of the world. If the sick hear this sutra, their illnesses will instantly disappear. They will neither die, nor they will neither grow old nor die. Now, offering one's life. We started to think about this, that this metaphor of, self-immolation and committing suicide and burning our arms off was this idea of offering one's life. Nichiren had a view of this from the Myoichi Amma Gozen Go Shoku. Your late husband gave his life for the Lotus Sutra. His small landholding that barely sustained him was confiscated on account of his faith in the Lotus Sutra. Surely that equaled giving his life. The youth of the snow mountains described in the Nirvana Sutra offered his body in exchange for half a verse of a Buddhist teaching, and the Bodhisattva medicine king burned his arms in offering to the Buddha. They were saints, and for them such acts were like water poured on fire. But your husband was an ordinary man, and so for him this sacrifice was like paper placed in fire. When we take this into consideration, his merit must surely be the same as theirs. And then the Shenji show, to maintain one's resolve at such times is the most important thing of all. And resolve is zeal, passion, virya. Now the 12 similes. Oh, let me stop here. I see that we've got some chat. Michael, do we have some questions that we want to get to? Hello? Okay. We'll come back to that.
Oh, I just realized you couldn't hear me. No, I was just saying it was just a link that was being shared of the book you were talking about.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. So there are 12 similes in this chapter about the Lotus Sutra that are quite famous. And I personally really, really love them. And if you ever need a little bit of a pick-me-up during the day, some of these passages are just wonderful, that feel free to add them to your daily service. You can print them out. You can write them on a little 3x5 card, like affirmation card, or post-it note and stick it on your mirror. They're really, really wonderful type affirmations. Let's kind of go through them. This sutra is like a clear, cool pool that can satisfy all who thirst. This sutra is like a fire to those who are cold, like robes to the naked, like a leader to a caravan of merchants, like a parent to children, like a ferry to those desiring to cross, like a doctor to the sick, like a lamp to those in darkness, like jewels to the poor, like a king to the people, like the open seas to traders, and like a torch to dispel the darkness. And another beautiful poetic metaphor Nichiren wrote in the Shiiji Shiro Dono Gosho. The Lord Buddha, a shipbuilder of infinitely profound wisdom, gathered the lumber of the 4 flavors and 8 teachings, planed it by openly setting aside skillful means, cut and assembled the planks, using both right and wrong in their non-duality, and completed the craft by driving home the spikes of the single truth that is like the supreme flavor of ghee. Then he launched it upon the sea of birth and death, unfurling its sails of the 3,000 realms on the mast of the single truth of the middle way, driven by the fair wind that is the real aspect of the Dharma. The vessel surges ahead, carrying aboard all sentient beings who can understand through faith. The Tathagata Shakyamuni takes the helm, the Tathagata Prabhudharatna mans the sails, and the 4 bodhisattvas, led by superior practice, strain, and unison at the creaking oars. This is the boat for the traveler. And in this chapter, the Buddha entrusted us with a mission. Therefore, Constellation Kingflower, I am entrusting you with this chapter of the former deeds of the Bodhisattva Medicine King. In the last 500-year period after my passing, proclaim and spread it broadly in Jambudvipa so that it will never be lost. Ensure that Mara and the Mara followers, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, kumdandas, and others have no chance to stop it. And this term of the Lotus Sutra literally means to, so this is where we got the idea of Kosen Rufu. The term from the Lotus Sutra literally means to declare and spread widely. Vast, wide, proclaim, circulate. So this is where it comes from. Now, we almost at the end of our discussion, and I do think it's worth to just touch briefly on the troubling parts of this chapter. First of all, no one should be condoning suicide or self-immolation. And when they, but the first is that his domain was free of gender distinction. It had no hells, no hungry spirits, no beasts, no asuras, no perils. The terrain was as level as the palm of the hand. So again, we have to think back that contextually, this was written at a time when women really were devalued and cultures were misogynistic. And this is not how we are today, nor do we want to be like that today. So this translation that we use of the Threefold Lotus Sutra has changed it to say gender distinction. And what they're trying to express here is that it means being free of the stereotypes of any gender, however one declares themselves. Being free to express ourselves in the world as we are without any preconceptions, whether you're man, woman, or something. And like, as a man, I have to be this, and as a woman, I have to be that we are free of those distinctions. We can self-identify however we want to be in the world. And then being flat really goes back to a time, think about when they didn't really have a lot of roads, or the roads they had were like kind of dirt tracks, and they didn't have bridges. So just, they were all sort of wandering cultures in those days to go from place to place and trade from village to village. So getting from point A to point B was really hard. So this idea of I wish you, well, in the sailors, they still say, may you have fair winds and following seas, as an expression of I hope your journey is smooth. That's what this is trying to say too. So being flat means one's journey is easy without barriers such as rivers and mountains. Again, as we said a couple of months ago, this idea of being flat is metaphorical for one of the four divine abodes of equanimity. We're just even keel. We're even. All of the different ups and downs that we have, the happiness and the joys, the pains, the sufferings, we remain even through all of that. And it also says of here, if a woman who hears this chapter of the former deeds is able to receive it, then in her next body, she won't be a woman. Of course, this stuff just drives me a little crazy. We have to take it with a grain of salt. And again, it really just means that we're free of these gender stereotypes, not that there's anything bad about a woman or a man, or that one should be one or the other. We can be and identify as we want. And again, self-immolation, it's metaphorical for illuminating through the world around us through the power of our zeal and faith that burns like a flame. It does not mean that we should actually go out and kill ourselves or self-emulate. So getting into our closing slides, what does chapter 23 mean to us? Dharma is medicine. Time is relative and short. What better activity and time could we have than helping reduce the world's suffering and helping other people find happiness and joy? What could be more profound and meaningful than that? Performing our daily practice, just doing our own daily practice, that is sharing the Dharma, because your transformation, like a stone thrown in a pond, ripples every inch of the shore. As you transform, your transformation is sharing the Dharma. And it's living the Eightfold Path and the 6 paramitas to the best of our ability, and freely sharing everyone's own unique gifts. And we all have different gifts. We all make mistakes and struggle. So keep trying. Don't judge yourself. Don't criticize yourself. When you make a mistake, simply begin again and again and again, because it's in this practice that we have that awakening does occur, transformation will happen. Every moment is another opportunity for us to practice. So have trust and confidence. The Dharma will transform and heal and awaken you. The Dharma is medicine. So everything that we were just talking about in the last 45 minutes is contained within the meditation container of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. When you recite Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, think about what you heard today, because this is part of what's contained in it. And I hope, as I always close all of these services and discussions, I hope that today's Dharma talk was motivational and inspirational, and you find that you want to chant Daimoku more. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo.